Well, good morning. I'm Jeff Coleman.
And I'm Debra Pinkerton. Welcome to Morning Light.
Well, the death toll from that catastrophic flooding in Texas has climbed now to 120 as the search for at least 150 others enters its seventh day. Hate, hoaxes, and rumors are making it harder, so much harder, for families to grieve the loss of their loved ones. Our Morning Light panel will discuss ways faith can confront social media wildfires of gossip.
In the meantime, here's a preview of what's coming up later in the show. The simple question, what can we do together to serve others? That question prompted one community to start a nonprofit that now helps orphans through the state of Pennsylvania.
They do some incredible work.
Yeah,
I'm
they
excited
do.
to hear that conversation. Well, it's been nearly a week since we learned of the still unfolding tragedy along the Guadalupe River. Flash floods assaulting communities in the Texas Hill Country, leaving a Christian camp for girls shaken by the loss of at least 27 campers and counselors. As the rescue window closes, another storm is brewing, this time on social media, a firestorm of blame and gossip and rumor, and it is everywhere.
Yeah, it's really hard to believe that it's taking it to this level, really. Now, besides the political jabs about funding or staff cuts to the National Weather Service and disaster response agencies, the Associated Press is reporting that some social media users are blaming man-made weather modifications, specifically cloud seeding, for the flood. Adding to the heartache, there have been false claims that two girls have been found alive clinging to a tree. And that's not all. Scammers are trying to extort parents who have publicized their cell numbers in hopes of identifying their daughters. This is causing unimaginable pain to already traumatized families.
It's like an assembly line of rumors. People are getting so dark in their creativity on this. But there are many bright spots alongside these devastating reports. Samaritan's Purse, the Salvation Army, and nearly a dozen faith-based organizations are on the scene, deploying resources and help in the aftermath. Even the Christian founder of the fast food giant Raising Cane's, one of my kids' favorites, Todd Graves, has contributed $1 million to relief efforts. So why are we so attracted to the salacious and sensational headline? Why are most major events now screened through a political lens before all others? Our Morning Light panel will break down how our faith can challenge the way we respond to gossip. Good morning, friends. Good to have you. Amber, welcome back.
Good morning.
I'm going to begin with you this morning. The idea that every event, no matter what it is, now immediately, almost within, there's maybe a half hour of breathing where people respond like normal people to an event. And then we seem to go straight to the political, and then now the sensational, and the scammers now layering on it. And it's almost happening every day in America. What's going on?
It's hard to watch, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think, sadly, it highlights that folks are broken. And when we see tragedy, it oftentimes can help us to deflect away from the pain in our hearts, from the difficulties, from the turmoil that we're facing, and to be able to latch onto something, maybe point out a fault in someone else, maybe come up with some kind of salacious conspiracy theory that's a short distraction away from our own troubles, from the fury and the hurricane within our own hearts. It can be a real temptation. And moments like this, I think, really exacerbate that brokenness and that hole in our hearts that can only be filled by a good and just God.
Robert, what she's saying here, is that something that makes sense to you when you say that we've got a storm in our hearts, and one of the reasons we go to the salacious is because it's distracting from our own lives? Is that part of what's happening here? What else do you think?
I think that's part of what's happening, but we are living in a world that is driven by entertainment. And it seems like our psyche and the way we react to things is filtered or processed through this filter of entertainment.
Right.
That everything, by entertainment also, I mean, a tragedy can be presented almost like an entertainment.
Right.
Sadly.
Right.
There's competition among the networks. Who gets the news out first? Is the news has been validated? Is it true? Is it confirmed? No, it's out there. And like you said, I think you said the other day, with Instagram and all this.
Right.
I mean, the internet news gets out before it's verified, confirmed, etc.
Yes.
So we react to that.
Right.
We react in an entertainment mode. It's like, oh, what's happening? So that edge of excitement, what's happening, the unknown, something has happened, another tragedy, another accident, another this,
Right.
another that. And then we function, and then we soak in anything that's thrown on. That's the way I see it.
Right.
We don't filter it, we don't check it.
It's the point, like, when do you decide to walk away?
Exactly.
John, how do you do this? How do you, when you're seeing this, how practically do you look at something and some reporting that's juicy, it's sensational, it's interesting? I mean, I could name several stories this week where people in our collective universe are living in the details until they find what they think will be the answer. And it can start with JFK and go all the way to the Epstein files and everything in between. What do you do to make sure that you don't fall in that trap?
Yeah, well, I think we have to first acknowledge the times we're in. And we're in a time of deception. Like, this is the great deceiver. You know, we're stuck on phones and this and that, and we're decoupled from our institutions. And I think the first thing is we have to be anchored to something. We have to have some belief pattern. If not, we fill in our own belief pattern. And these things are so difficult to see. And you hear the stories about kids. It makes people very vulnerable.
Right.
And with vulnerability in this age of the great deception, that's when these literally evil people come in to exploit people in these circumstances. But again, I'll push you back to being in these institutions, in the church. You know, you talk about brokenness. I think that's a great way to describe it. And I think it's part of the church is understood as the hospital, right? So we're all kind of in recovery at the hospital for brokenness. But if not, you know, what are you going to fill the God hole with? And because you can search all kinds of news, it's easy to fill the God hole with stuff that tells you you're right. And I think that in these circumstances where it's so upsetting, when we have to actually acknowledge that we're mortal and we don't control all that stuff, you know, we seek stuff to make that make sense. And if it's not God, then nothing makes sense if it doesn't, if it's not centered in that.
Well, Amber, do you have any practical ways that you've constructed that keep your internal dialogue not going straight to the sensational? Or what overlays do you put over when you see a piece of news to say, I have to stop, look, listen, you know, yellow light, warning light here, I can't go down that way? What keeps you from doing that?
Sure, yeah. It takes a lot of discernment, doesn't it? It does take a lot of self-control that we're commanded to have, and that's something that I'm trying to teach my kids that right now, right? We're in an age where kids have access to so much coming at them so fast, and we have controlled that significantly with our kids. But what I try to tell them is, you're going to be tempted to look at every new thing, every new juicy tidbit, every image that you're going to want to look at more and more, and you have to pull back. Is this good for me? And is this causing me to do something or feel something that is in right conduct with the Bible, with God's will? And if you find yourself slipping into this anger unmoored from actual righteousness that we understand from the Bible, if you find yourself unmoored from actual goodness and looking for the good that God has done in this world, you need to step back.
Right.
And that's easier said than done. But that's what I try to do, because otherwise it can be very tempting.
Yeah. Yeah, this temptation cycle, Robert, when we're looking at, I think to Amber's point, there's a difference between we're driving down the street and there is, you're the first on the scene when there's an accident or a fire, and these events which are happening 50 years ago, 20 years ago, or 1,000 miles away. How do we right that so that we're actually available to the people who are in front of us who have real needs and not live in this parallel universe of events that are not in our control?
That's a tough one. I think both John and Amber alluded to this. We need to disengage, and that's intentional. It has to be intentional. I was forced to disengage recently because my TV went on the blink after that storm we had a week ago.
Robert.
I know. My wife was happy.
Morning Light's online, by the way. If that happens to you, just hop on your phone. You can still see Morning Light.
Well, today Best Buy is coming to look at it. So, but forced disengagement.
Yeah.
It's been good,
Right.
honestly, and that's what it's going to take. But when you disengage, what are you going to engage with? Mm-hmm. And that's where church, as John alluded to, or scriptures, or
Because there is a massive void. Information
Yes.
scratches some itch for us.
Exactly. It's like floodwaters,
Right.
that come in.
Yeah.
Not, a wall or a window may hold it for a while, but then boom,
Right.
bursts open and there it is. And so that's the tough part.
Yeah.
But it does take intentional disengagement to process what's happening
Yeah.
and to filter out. And of course, I've mentioned a couple of times, go back to prayer. Is even turning your questions over to the Lord. Is what I'm seeing true, or if a family is suffering that has lost a child.
What you just said there, I think,
Yeah.
is so practical. Asking God to help us filter through.
Yeah.
Is it true or not?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
So let's close with you, John. The world now, we're going to go into another news cycle, and there will be something within the next 24 hours. Maybe it comes from the White House, maybe it's from Congress, maybe it's from some village in Alaska, but there will be something that will draw us in. Where do you practically go, driving down the road, you hear the news, you get an alert on your phone, to take the detour into faith, not fear?
Yeah. I don't think humans were wired to make all these decisions by ourselves in a vacuum, even with the guidance of scripture and all these things, which are great. But I think we only can understand this complicated world that's beyond our comprehension in the context of a community where other people can contextualize from their little understanding of this vast world. And I think when those communities are healthy and connected to the church as God intended from the beginning, I think that gives us context to be able to manage it. It's still still hard because we can't be holistic, but I think that's the only answer.
I'm glad and sincerely that we have this table where our audience can pull up a chair and we can look at news and not immediately go to entertainment, which I think so much of the news media is driven to. So thank you. This was very helpful this morning.
Thank you,
Yeah. Well, coming up on Morning Light, choosing to become a foster or adoptive parent is one of those most powerful decisions you can ever make. You'll learn how the Keystone Family Alliance can help you through the process. You're watching Morning Light right here on Lighthouse TV.
Statistics show there are nearly 400,000 children in the welfare system. According to Christian Alliance for Orphans, neglect is the top reason children enter foster care. It's followed by parental drug abuse, caretaker inability to cope, and physical abuse. For foster parents, it can be emotionally, physically, and mentally challenging. In Pennsylvania, there are 14,000 kids in foster care. 2,000 of those kids are waiting to be adopted. A central Pennsylvania nonprofit wants to equip Christians to help orphans and vulnerable children in the state and around the world. Joining me is Vince Smith, the executive director of Keystone Family Alliance. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, good morning.
So tell us about Keystone Family Alliance.
Yeah, so we bridge the gap between the church and the child welfare system across the state of Pennsylvania with nearly 14,000 churches in the state and about 14,000 children in foster care in our state. All these churches have a biblical mandate to care for orphans and vulnerable children, and so that's our hope, is to kind of bridge that gap and address the child welfare crisis.
So how does that play out? How does it work?
Yeah. So there's a huge need for foster parents in the state. Right now, with 14,000 kids in foster care, there's about 3,000 of those whose parental rights have already been terminated. So they're sitting on a waiting list, waiting to be adopted. Most of them will wait 5 to 7 years before they find a forever family. We know that about 1,100 of them will age out of the system in Pennsylvania this year. So when they do, 80% of those boys will be in jail within 2 years. Nearly 70% of the girls will be pregnant and single before their 21st birthday. And that doesn't even start to get into the number of those children who will be trafficked, homeless. So we kind of look at that and say, again, this is not okay, not on our watch, not with the number of churches that we have with this biblical mandate. So we love to be able to get into the churches and empower them to recruit foster families and then build what we call engineered care communities to wrap around those foster families to support those families in their journey. Because what we keep finding is that stats show us that nearly 60% of foster families won't make it through the first year, and nearly 90% will not make it through the second year.
Wow. What are the biggest struggles?
Yeah. When you invite kids from hard places into your home, you're inviting the trauma that they've experienced over months, years. Just that all comes with them. And we find as foster parents, when we sign up for this, we actually didn't know what we were signing up for. So when that first group of kids shows up, you're like, oh no, I need some help, but I don't know where to get it. And that's where Keystone Family Alliance really wants to be able to help equip those families to be able to do it well.
So when a church does this, how does this work for them, for the people who say, yes, I am going to adopt a child? Is it something where you have church members who are going to be working around them and helping them? Yeah. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so when we engage churches, our hope is to raise awareness and let them know what the needs are in their local community and say, hey, there's a huge need for foster families. Not everyone can or should foster adopt because it is hard work, but we want to recruit healthy families. And then we're just going to empower those churches to recruit volunteers, a group of at least 5 people willing to wrap around that foster family. And when we call these engineered care communities. And when you agree to be a volunteer on a care community, you're going to take a meal one time per month to that foster family. Maybe you can help with childcare, transportation, yard work. We have college students giving guitar lessons, which are mentors to these kids, but also give foster parents a break. So our motto is everyone can do something, and we're just asking Jesus followers, what is your something? And trying to give these practical next steps for Christians in these churches to be able to take a next step. So we really come in and equip what we call church advocates. We train them to be able to run these ministries locally.
Wow, and it's certainly reassuring to know if there are other people that are going to be there to sort of help you in times of need. I need to go to the doctor, I need a babysitter, things like that. What types of transformations are you seeing? Yeah,
so many stories that I could share in that space, but we had a sibling group of 3 dropped off at our house one night. They had just been removed from their bio parents. They saw things they should have never seen. They're in tears. We still have 3 of our youngest children at home. That night when they showed up at our house, it was absolute chaos. We're trying to plan doctor's appointments, therapy appointments, visits with bio parents. They didn't have enough clothes to go to school the next day. It's absolutely crazy at our house. So when somebody in our care community showed up with a lasagna, it was a game changer. My wife was like, praise Jesus, we can make it through the night. So that team then showed up the next day and said, hey, can we help with transportation? They saved us hours and hours of drive time just by transporting kids to appointments and whatnot. So what we started to see is those people that show up and deliver that lasagna, they start to get a firsthand look at what foster care looks like. And they say, you know what? We could do this, especially if we had a team. And so we get to see so many, about 35% of people who serve on a care community will eventually become a foster parent. So it doesn't just transform the lives of the children we're serving, but it's transforming Jesus followers who realize that we're called to this space, but just aren't sure how to take a next step.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just being the hands and feet of Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And coming up next on Morning Light, being a foster parent does require a lot of patience and time. You will hear some of the daily struggles and the rewards. That's right after the break. Welcome back. We just heard that the mission of Keystone Family Alliance is to meet the needs of orphans and vulnerable children. So what does it mean to be a foster parent? Cindy King, the equipping director with Keystone Family Alliance, joins us this morning to answer that question. So what does it mean to be a foster parent? Share your personal story. You have been a foster parent.
Yes, and that's a risky question because I could talk for a long time about that. But my husband John and I have been foster parents off and on for about 30 years. In that time, we've had about 30 children come through our home. We've had anywhere from infants to teenagers, a couple of teen moms. We've also had 5 biological children. So currently we say we are the parents to 9 children, 5 biological, 4 that have come into our home through foster care and adoption, and we currently also have a foster placement.
So you're a busy person.
We are busy.
Talk to us about some of the struggles. I think that's sometimes the greatest fear, that it's going to be too hard to do this.
It is, and it's a fine line between telling people the honest truth, but also wanting people to step up and, as we say, wreck your lives. But it is totally worth it. But yes, there are struggles, and I think people need to go into fostering knowing that, understanding that, being ready for it, finding the trainings that are going to be helpful, finding a community. The care communities that Vince has already talked about are invaluable in that, so that you know you're not alone.
And I think that is the most important thing, knowing that you are not alone, that there are going to be people there to help you.
Absolutely, because when children come into your home, they're coming in with the early childhood trauma that they've experienced. It affects their brain, their body, their biology, and their belief systems. So of course it's going to affect their behaviors. And it takes a toll, and it's difficult. And so having that community of support is so important.
And certainly many people are not really ready to deal with those things, or may not even know how to deal with them. So it's important to know that there are people there to help you. Talk to us about some of the happy moments. I'm sure there are many.
There are, and it's important to remember to look back and see the progress, because progress does happen. Sometimes it's very slow, and in the moment it's hard to remember where we started from and where we are now, but just seeing that and recognizing that there is progress, that brings joy. Also watching adults, children who have come through our home and who are now adults and who have done the difficult work of finding healing, recognizing that they don't need to and they shouldn't need to live in that victimhood, but that God can take their story and use it. And that's a joy to just watch them as adults now being who they were created to be.
Yeah, such an accomplishment, all through God's work too.
Absolutely.
I'm sure faith plays a big part as far as walking you through this journey.
I don't know how people do it without a faith. That is where I have to start every day on my knees saying, you've got to give me, you've got to pour your love into me, because sometimes I don't have it to pour out unless you've already given that to me. I need you to fill me with the fruit of the Spirit, because we're all human. None of us are perfect. None of us are great parents. We're all imperfect, sinful beings. And so there are moments we're going to struggle, but I need to constantly be asking for that help and that support from Christ. But I also need to remember that this is part of my journey towards sanctification as well. And I thank God for the fact that I've had to make some changes. I've had to find some healing in my own life so that I can be the parent that children need me to be.
How has this journey transformed your family's life?
People have often asked, aren't you afraid that fostering will wreck your children? And I say, no, because it has wrecked my children, but in all the best ways. It has wrecked their sense of entitlement or their sense of materialism or consumerism, because we can't do things that other families can do, or our home doesn't look like the homes of other families. We have holes in the walls, and we're not always seated nicely and listening as we should be, because trauma changes the way a child is going to behave in a home. So it has changed them to understand that radical hospitality is something that we are all called to do, but it does come with a cost, just as Christ entering our world came with a cost. And he walked into our mess, and so we can do the same and walk into the messy stories of other people.
Wow, that is such a powerful message. I know that we talked about that in church on Sunday about hospitality, and you're certainly playing it out with this ministry. Thank you so much for being with us.
Absolutely.
And to learn more about becoming a foster or adoptive parent with Keystone Family Alliance, check out keyfam.org. Stay with us. We are back right after the break.
Welcome back. Well, what an incredible conversation that was. Well, there's a term which might seem a little strange in an age where science leaves so little room for faith, for belief. It's a legal term, an actual legal term, a phrase that pops up in court cases again and again and weather-related insurance claims. And for the past 7 days, you've been hearing it a lot on the news. Act of God. 3 words used to define an event that's beyond our explanation, beyond human control, something we could never predict. Every time we see one of these acts of God, it feels like we want to hold somebody accountable. The politician, the president, Congress, an insurance executive, anyone, maybe the fire chief or the policeman on duty. But tragedies like the one we saw at Camp Mystic, tragedies that defy common sense, tragedies that outline the limits of our perception, force us to confront our human power. There are limits to our human power. We're helpless. We need help. An act of God is an admission we don't really control things, and we will never really control things. The truth is, the miracle of our lives, the miracle of your life today, right now, is an act of God. No matter how out of control you feel, you are not out of control, because our lives are firmly and securely and completely in His hands. Where our control ends, God's power, God's strength begins. That's the truth we walk into today. For Debra and the entire Morning Light team, I'm Jeff Coleman. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for spending this day with us. Go check on your neighbors, and we'll see you again back here tomorrow morning.